Snoop Dogg and D.I.
Hello and welcome to Villanova Tip Time. I'm your host, Chris Notaro, and we are back as the 2-0 Villanova Wildcats carry their number 21 ranking into the legendary Palestra to face the Penn Quakers out of the Ivy League in the first game of the revamped Big Five tournament, also known now as the Big Six. Not really, but should be. Remember that all season, Villanova Tip Time, a member of the Nova Insider Network, is brought to you by Homefield Apparel. You can use promo code Nova Insider, all one word, Nova Insider, at checkout to grab your favorite Homefield apparel. If you're not familiar with Homefield Apparel, like, they got a lot of cool stuff. Go to the website. If you're a Nova fan and you enjoy like cool Nova merch, just look at it. No hard sell for me, but if you look at it and you see what I see, you're probably going to want to use that promo code. And I promise you, if you haven't looked already, you won't be disappointed that you know what's out there. So tonight we're going to talk about how we're feeling on the Big East as a whole, 1 week into the season, as much as we can know, given that there haven't been a ton of notable contests, and everybody sort of seems like they are who we thought they were through 1 week. How we're feeling about the Wildcats through the first 2 games of Villanova play. We'll talk about this revamped Big Five tournament. We'll introduce tonight's opponent, the Penn Quakers, and what we're looking out for with the Cats tonight in the game. But first, we have to introduce our first special guest of the season. This man is a great friend of the program. He's a VUHoops.com writer. This man is a Road to the Garden co-founder. This man has launched a new quick hitter Nova basketball podcast called Mainline Minute, which is a fellow member of the Nova Insider Network. He's a credentialed member of the Villanova media who the Twitter sphere might recognize as Tommy Scoops, my good friend, Tommy Godin. Tommy, how we feeling?
I feel great, Chris. Thank you so much for that introduction.
Well, of course. And I have to plug the Mainline Minute. We're, I think, 3 episodes in, right? 3?
Yes, sir. Yep.
3 episodes into a new quick hitter podcast that Tommy launched. Tommy's a real hardworking dude. He's involved in a lot of different outlets, as I just rattled off, but he launched this most recent one, and I love the quick hitter concept, 15 to 20 minutes in length, kind of getting you caught up on the need to knows without going too deep into the conversation or the theory, really just to keep you updated, especially for those of you, if you miss a game here and there, this is a great way to kind of catch up on what's happening. But Tom, I love the concept. How are you kind of settling in with it so far?
I think I'm finding my groove. I think the first episode was a little bit tougher with, the lack of content, but as we've moved on, I think I'm getting better with every episode. I think it's going to be something that I'm going to be able to connect with this community with the fans. I'm a huge fan of the short form concept, and I think it's going to be something that everybody can enjoy.
Yeah, can't sing praises to the short form enough. And I think one of the things that's exciting for both of us is there's plenty to talk about given the size of the rotation that Villanova's running out. If they're playing 10 or 11 guys a night, there's a lot to talk about as far as like stock up, stock down. So that's going to be pretty sweet. We're gonna pretty much spend, I would say, most of the time on this program on that very topic. But before we get into the Cats, Tommy, what jumps out through the first week of play? Again, not just about the Cats, but really honing in on kind of the rest of the Big East.
I mean, what a wild week in Big East basketball, right? I think the biggest surprise in the entire conference is the Butler Bulldogs. They've looked outstanding in their first 2 games, going 2-0. At one point, they were up 55-12 in their matchup with Southeast Missouri. Outstanding stuff from the Butler Bulldogs in the first week of play. I mean, UConn looks like UConn. Donovan Clingan is one of those guys who's going to be pushing for not only an all-conference guy, he's going to be pushing for an all-American, 7'2", 7'3", whatever he is. He looks like he's taking that leap as well. Tyler Kolek still looks like Tyler Kolek, and Cam Jones as well. Stephen Ashworth really fitting in with the guard play at Creighton. Him and Baylor Shireman finding some synergy in the backcourt there is nice to see. I mean, all good things for the Big East for about 9 of the teams.
Yeah, I think what's interesting to me, a couple things jump out. One, Marquette, UConn, and Creighton sort of all jockeying for position there in the middle of the top 10, depending on what you look at, be it AP or sort of some independent ranking. You can find those in any order, 1, 2, 3, Marquette, UConn, Creighton, honestly. And I've seen so many of these rankings, I forget which order the AP actually has them in. What's interesting, the thing that jumps out to me is like the defending national champion isn't highest among those three, even though they return a lot of guys. Klingon's one of the best players in the country, as you just called out. The absolutely loaded freshman class coming in there as well. So I think the top of the Big East kind of like is what we thought it was through a 1 week, right? There's a lot to learn, especially as we get into these Thanksgiving tournaments next week. I think we're going to learn whose stock is up, whose stock is down. I've seen people call out Nova as sort of being alone in this like second tier of the Big East. And then the third tier is pretty much everybody else except for Georgetown and DePaul, right?
Yeah, that was an incredibly disappointing performance from Georgetown. They dropped that game to Holy Cross. They let up that run late. They're going to struggle with any competent backcourt this year in year one under Ed Cooley. I didn't think that they were going to struggle to the point where they would drop a bye game to Holy Cross. But, I mean, these Ed Cooley teams, they get better as the year goes on, right? So I'm less worried about them than I am of DePaul, who we are on full-on panic mode 1 week into this season. They didn't just lose the first two games. I mean, Purdue-Fort Wayne's a solid mid-major school, but, I mean, this is likely Tony Stubblefield's last year if this continues over there in Chicago.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. You got it, just completely non-competitive. And I think effort concerns, right? I didn't watch too much. You just like tune in, just have basketball in the background. But
right.
If you're following the Twitter conversation, definite effort concerns from DePaul people on Twitter, the few that remain, right? And everybody else kind of watching along and sort of rooting for the Big East at this time of year because we want the Big East to sort of reign supreme and look awesome. And Georgetown and DePaul not necessarily doing their part in week one. All right, so let's switch gears over to the Cats. That's what everybody's here to talk about. Opening thoughts on what we've seen for Villanova so far relative to expectations. Again, Tommy's talked a lot about this if you've tuned into Mainline. So I'm going to start us off by kind of breaking us into a couple of categories here. I think in the captain category, you've got Justin Moore and Eric Dixon. In the what I would call starting caliber transfers category, you've got Burton, Bamba, and Hart. Burton and Bamba, who have definitely established themselves already. Hart, who's looked okay, but hasn't necessarily had that breakout yet. Alone in the next big thing category, Mark Armstrong. And then in what I'm calling the wild cards category of people that have been, I would say, pleasantly surprising, Lance Ware, Jordan Longino, Brendan Housen. I think in reverse order, Brendan Housen, nobody's surprised. Everybody in the Nova community knows that he's one of the best sharpshooters we've ever had, coming off of a game where that was on full display. Jordan Longino, a little bit more of a question mark, because of the injury history, but looking like he might be back to the form we want him in. And then I think inarguably the most pleasant surprise of the team so far is Lance Ware, kind of coming out of nowhere, picking up some big minutes and really being a nice compliment to Eric Dixon down low. I don't know how much we're going to see that tonight against the guard-heavy Penn game style. We'll get into that more later. But I think, Tom, with me sort of setting it off with kind of those tiers, what are you seeing from Villanova so far relative to expectations?
I think they've been good. I'm not going to go and say that they've been great. The game against Lemoyne should never have been close, and it was. I don't know if that's a lack of execution or where that comes from, but it was close in the first half, and then Villanova pulled away in the second half. They did what they were supposed to do. I was listening to a podcast, Big East Barroom, with the Cassidy brothers, and they were saying that that's a testament to Kyle Neptune and his coaching. Those games last year, we had the game against Temple and then the debacle in the PK 85 over in Portland, where we would lose games that we were absolutely, like the Portland game last year. I don't think anyone was going into that game thinking Villanova was going to lose. And sure enough, they did. So I think the game against Lemoyne could have gone really bad. I think Kyle Neptune made the necessary adjustments that he had to, especially on the defensive end. That's where it all started. That's when the game flipped, when they really cranked up the defensive intensity, went on that 23-6 run over the final 8 minutes of the first half against Lemoyne. One guy for Villanova that's exceeded expectations, not necessarily on paper, but for the eye test for me, has been Hakeem Hart, which may come as a little bit of a surprise. He led the team, or was tied for the highest plus minus in the Lemoyne game. He's been handling the ball. He's been playing outstanding defense. He connected on a 3 in that game. I think the offense with Hakeem Hart will come. But I've been really impressed with all that they're throwing at him, handling the ball, playing solid defense, guarding 1 through 5 on the floor when he's out there. Not looking past this game against Penn, but we're playing against the team that he transferred from, Maryland, on Friday. So I think he has a little bit of revenge on his mind there. But I've been pleasantly surprised with a lot of guys, but I want to give Hakeem Hart his props through the first 2 games.
Yeah, glad to hear you say it. As I was doing prep for this show, Tommy, I was like, ooh, Hakeem Hart getting 1 game away from the Maryland game, where I think he's going to be a big topic of conversation, not only in the pregame, but you're going to hear the announcers talk about it all throughout the game. And I'm sure he's looking for that opportunity. I don't want to call it a revenge game, because I feel like you leave on good terms. There's not any sort of spite to it. But you have to imagine there's a little extra juice for him in that one, wanting to kind of show out against his former team and his former program. Tommy, before we keep rolling into the setup for tonight, how much of, like you said, I think good, not great. I think it was a pleasant enough first week of the season, right? The results were about where we wanted them to be in terms of the final scores. But like you said, a little too much hanging on, too close for comfort earlier in the game than we probably would have liked. How much of that do you attribute to just a lot of new pieces and a very deep rotating lineup, still trying to figure out how they gel?
All of it, or at least 90% of it. I think, the Villanova way it's different than anything else in the Big East. It's different from anything else in the country. It's unique. I mean, Villanova believes that what they have, with the attitude, with the culture that they build, that goes far beyond the reaches and the walls of the Finneran Pavilion, is special. And I mean, it has proven results. We've seen in 2016, 2018, and all the other years that we finished atop the Big East or champions in the Big East tournament. It's hard to learn that Villanova culture. I didn't expect any of these guys to get it the first 2 games into the year, but I think anybody would have signed up for 2 20-plus point victories the first week of the year. I mean, we've seen some teams, Wisconsin, I think it was, or Indiana, they've been struggling a little bit. I mean, these big teams are struggling, and we're not so far. I think we would have signed up for that. It was great to see Tyler Burton, TJ Bamba, that play that everybody was talking about from game 1. It was the new guys, Bamba and Burton, diving on the floor for the loose ball, pulling up from 3. That's the attitude, that's the culture that they teach in those walls, and that was good to see through game 1, and it's only going to get better from there.
A little bit of inside baseball I'm going to share, Tommy. I hope you don't mind. So Tommy texted me, I don't know, it might have been the day after that game, and was like, what do you make of the play? Like, do you buy – because it was like a weird conversation going on Twitter about that play, the diving play, that, then the missed layup, and then the Burton 3 on the way back down. And I literally jumped out of my chair. Like, I jumped out of my seat. I was like hooting and hollering. I was up for that. Right. And then I saw the conversation like, oh, I don't know what people are talking about. It was a sloppy play. It was a sloppy play. And Tommy texted me, he's like, where are you on this? And I was like, you already know where I'm at on this. Like, anybody who wants to hate on that and says like, oh, this was a sloppy play, guess what? If they were playing the game, they're the guy that gives up the basket because it's like, oh, it was a sloppy play. Like, fighting to the, like, that's what it's about, man. Like, that's ingrained in the DNA of this program. So listen, I found myself saying a lot over the last week, like, I don't know if this team is going to be amazing. I do think they have a pretty high ceiling, and only time is really going to tell on that. But I feel like we're in for a fun year either way. Like, this seems like, when you're rolling 10, 11 deep, fun can be had here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. And it allows Kyle Neptune and company to get a little bit more aggressive with the switches. You get some guys in foul trouble. You have the guys that you feel comfortable bringing in, like Nana Njoku, Lance Ware for Eric Dixon. You need a spark. I mean, there's no better fire starter or spark plug. I keep saying fire starter, spark plug in the conference, maybe the country, than Brendan Hawson can come in and change a game like that. So yeah, I think it allows coaching staff to be way more aggressive, and that's a recipe for success in my book.
So I wax poetic with how fun I think this team is, and I realize we're only about 5 minutes to game time here. So I'm going to switch gears to the revamped Big Five real quick. I'm going to explain how it works for anybody following along. So the Big Five is actually now the Big Six with the addition of Drexel. So instead of the normal round robin that it's been up till this point, it's now 2 pods of 3 teams. So in pod 1, you've got Nova, Penn, and St. Joe's. St. Joe's beat Penn a couple days ago in their first game in the pod. And then in the second pod, you've got Temple, LaSalle, and Drexel. So then you're going to play both the teams in your pod, right? So Nova's going to play Penn tonight. They're going to play St. Joe's 2 weeks from Wednesday, I believe. And then on Saturday, December 2nd at the Wells Fargo, there's going to be the Big 5 Classic where the 1 seeds from each pod are going to play in the championship game. The 2 seeds in each pod are going to play for like the 3rd place game, and the last seed in every pod is going to play for the 5th place game. So cool concept. Excited to see what this is like and how the city sort of leans into it. And just to keep it rolling, introducing this Penn team before, Tommy, I want your thoughts on kind of how tonight's going to go. Many of you may remember Penn's sort of superstar player from last year, Jordan Dingle. And even though he's transferred out of Penn, don't you worry, you're going to see him plenty this year as he's transferred to St. John's. But for tonight, all of Penn's scoring options so far seem to be guards. So they're going to be going, a smaller ball lineup, which I would say isn't terribly inconsistent with their historical program out of the Ivy League. Interesting to see for me how Kyle Neptune chooses to attack that, given that he's got 11 playable options. So Tommy, what are you looking for out of the Penn Quakers tonight in this game in general? Is this one that Cats fans should be worried about? How competitive is this game going to be? And what do you expect to see from the Cats tonight?
Well, it's a Big 5 game, so I think inherently then that it's going to be pretty competitive just because it's a Big 5 game. I mean, but I was talking to Kyle Neptune earlier this week at media availability, and he says Penn does a good job of doing something to throw you off, and they're really good at that something. We don't know what that something is yet, but once we do know what it is, we're going to have to adjust to it. I think that something is going to be a balanced scoring attack on the perimeter from guards Tyler Perkins and Clark Slackert. There we go. Their names are hard to pronounce. Yeah. But I think if they shut those 2 guys down, they should have a pretty good job. They should feel pretty comfortable about their prospects in this one. Another key to success here for the Wildcats is going to be attacking the glass. They have not done a great job on the glass to start the season. Penn has. They were a plus 30 against Bucknell on Wednesday, 52-22 on the glass. That's their largest margin against a Division I opponent since 1974. So I think Villanova is really going to have to attack the glass. I think they're going to have to play the guards hard, but I think Kyle Neptune is going to have his hands full trying to figure out what that something is that Penn's going to throw at Villanova.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I had queued up as what to watch for is like sort of the juxtaposition, if you will, between owning the boards and matching quickness on the perimeter. Perimeter defense was, I would say, fine / not that great last week. It was really why both of those games were closer early. It was because the opponent was sort of shooting highly above average from 3. How much of that is luck? How much of that is them being juiced up to play big bad Villanova? Probably a little bit, but still there's a perimeter defense concern there. Like Tommy said, I think that's going to be something that Penn might look to for their game plan, but they've also been strong rebounding. And so if you have Dixon and Ware on the court at the same time, is that really addressing your perimeter issue? Maybe not. We'll see. So I think it's going to be an interesting thing to look at to see how Coach Neptune sort of balances that back and forth. What do you make of Eric Dixon coming up 0 on the on the scoring column? Just to give you my take first and not to leave you exposed to an open-ended question, I think it's overblown to say that he had a bad game. I actually am impressed at the unselfishness of him not to keep he wasn't forcing it. He could have tried to get his and pour a couple points in there, but he kept finding opportunities for his teammates. The team still scored 80+ points. I think that's like a sign of maturity and growth. Not that he was never a selfish guy anyway, but for people to call that a bad game is kind of interesting to me. And I'm looking for him to maybe have a bounce back answer at some point in the next game or two, just to remind people that he's still there. But Tommy, what do you make of that?
Yeah, not a bad game by any means. And I know we're up against the clock, so I'll keep it short. I mean, if you told me before the season that Eric Dixon wasn't going to score a point and we'd still win by 26, I think anybody would have signed up for that one. This team is so deep this year, so many guys that can get to a bucket that Eric Dixon doesn't feel like he has to score every game. And we didn't have that last year. So I think that's a beautiful thing. I think this game He will bounce back. I think it's going to be a race to 70 points, and I think the Wildcats get there first.
I agree. I'm with Tommy G on this one, and that's going to do it for us here at the pregame show on behalf of the Nova Insider Network and Homefield Apparel. It is time for the Big Five, so refill those beverages and get ready to rock. We will see you on Friday night from Maryland in the Gavitt tip-off games. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, it's tip time.